In this last video, we're just going to end with some general closing comments and just general kind of good practices for Matlab. These are kind of all different things that don't really go together, but just a collection of good practices. This first one, terminate each line to suppress output. So you'll notice that we've been putting semicolons everywhere. With a semicolon, what you put in the screen doesn't print out. Without a semicolon, it appears. So when you're working with small things like this, it's not too big of a deal, but if you were to accidentally leave a semicolon off, it kind of blows away your whole display. So in general, you want to have semicolons. And if you forget one, Matlab actually is going to warn you. See, that popped up when I took the semicolon away. Matlab's actually popping up a warning saying, please put a semicolon here to suppress the output. And I can even just click the fix button here, and it will just put a semicolon back there. So that's something that you'll want to keep in mind, and that's what we've been doing all along. The smart indent feature is very useful. Maybe I didn't do a very good job indenting things, and I kind of used different spacings to where it looks kind of weird and maybe just out of order and sloppy, right? Something like that. Well, if I highlight this code and right-click, one of the options is Smart Indent, and Matlab will just fix all that and indent everything automatically for me. So that's a very useful feature to automatically do all that for you, so you don't have to do all the indent spaces yourself. If you are going to put spaces yourself, please just use spaces, not tabs. It's just kind of the general rule for programming that you want to actually use spaces here and not tabs. That's kind of the convention. Try to write code that gives you a green box when you are done. What does that mean? Well, if we look over here at the top, there's this little box. It's kind of orange right now, and it says warnings found. Click to go to next message. And there's all these like orange lines that are giving me warnings about things. Okay, so let's look at this top one. I can actually click here, and it will take me to that line of code where the warning occurs. And there's this little red squiggly line, and it's giving me a warning that the value assigned to variable t1 might be unused. So basically Matlab is saying, hey, you're computing t1 and then you never ever use it again. So why are you computing it in the first place if you never ever need it? Okay? So Matlab tries to look at your code and be smart about things and give you some hints. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of these different warnings so you can see what I mean by a green box. Here's an interesting one. Actually using one I is faster than using J here, so we can just click the fix button and let Matlab fix that for us. And then these other warnings are just some warnings that we have seen before. I'm just going to comment them out for now. Definitely not fixing the problem, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how the warning bar here on the right works right now. So after I get all those taken care of, now this has turned green and there are no warnings found. Okay, so when you're done writing a piece of code or a function or a script, just take a look at this warning bar over here and see if there are any obvious things that Matlab has identified for you to take a look at. It's just kind of good practice. Okay. Do that. Let Matlab fix all that for me. Smart indent. Okay, we're back to where we were. Let's continue on our list. Try avoiding for loops and use vectorized calculations. We've talked about that a bit. Matlab is Matrix Laboratory. It's very good at matrix and vector operations. So if you can avoid doing for loops, that's the better way to go. In general, when we work with variables, it's really good to put all the kind of parameters at the top. If you have numbers, define that number as a variable and put that variable at the very top of your script. Try not to just hard code what I call magic numbers just randomly in your code, just weird numbers floating around. Define them as a variable at the top and then use those variables down low. So if anybody ever needs to come and look at your code, if you do have any numbers that you're using, they're all kind of in one little spot to look at. When you're working with M files, you can just type edit really easily, my new file, and it will just pop up the M file editor, and there you go. So that's a very easy way to create a new M file instead of clicking here or whatever. If you need to get help, there's a lot of help here. Help, rand. You just do, if you know the function name, you can type help function name and read all that you would want about that function. And if that's not enough, you can click here on the documentation, and it will actually pop up the documentation and give you all kinds of details. Okay? Here within help, you can actually search for other things, histogram maybe, and it will pop up anything it can find about the things that you search for. So if you are looking for a specific function or you need help with something, just come over here and type search and see what there is. or even just do a plain Google search and see if somebody else has had the same problem or issue or was looking for the same thing. Number 9, try to avoid using Matlab toolboxes. So Matlab has a whole bunch of toolboxes that you can buy to go along with kind of like a basic Matlab install. They're very specialized and they can be very useful. The reason I say to avoid using them is because if you use a function from a toolbox that you have, and then you need to share your code with somebody else and they try to run it and they don't have that toolbox, then they won't be able to run your code. So if there's any way you can write your own version of that function, that's definitely the way to go so you can have code that's more shareable with other people. If you can't avoid it, that's just the way it is sometimes. You have to use the toolbox, that's fine. Just keep in mind that if other people have not paid the money for that toolbox, then they will not be able to run your code. And then finally, some debugging commands. The db stop of error is a very useful command, so is db quit. Let me just show you a quick example of how those work. I'm going to open up the compute area function, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in just a horrible error right here. That doesn't make any sense. If I try to call this function, compute area with 2, it's going to yell at me about some error, but it just kind of bails when it's done right here. So sometimes when you're running a very long program, all of a sudden you'll get this error and the program just stops and you're like, what is going on? Well, the db stop if error is very useful. It says do debug, and when an error occurs, I want you to freeze right where the error has occurred. So if I turn that on and redo this, see what happens? It actually freezes right at the line where there is a problem. And here in the workspace, it's telling me I have no idea what XPI is. It was the same message we had before, but it's frozen right at that line. That's kind of a useful thing to do. Now that I'm frozen there, I can hit F10 to continue, or I could do I'll show you, I can do a db quit to exit db mode, db debug mode. So the db stop of error is very useful. Sometimes when you're running big programs, it just bombs, and there's a message and it tells you the function and the line number, but sometimes you would like it to actually freeze so you can actually go inspect variables and try to figure out exactly what's going on. That concludes the basic Matlab tutorial. Hope you enjoyed. And Matlab is a very useful tool. I've been using it for 10, 12 years, almost daily. Takes some getting used to, but it is a very useful analysis tool for just a wide range of disciplines. And this sequence of videos has hopefully got you somewhat familiar with some very basic things. Still lots more to learn, but hopefully this has helped you learn some of the basics.